Hey, Slay Queens, it's Nathan Borg, and this is Just Tack. Like, to be honest, in high school, I was quite bullied a lot. Kids take my cochlear implant, break it. I never had a scene on Ramsay Street. I'm gonna get emotional. I was so terrified. I was like, I can't do this. Everyone's welcome on Ramsay Street.
Before we get stuck into today's conversation, I want to thank the official beauty partner of Just Tack, beautyboat.com. They have supported us from the very beginning, and they are stepping into this new era with us. Whether you are looking for Egyptian Magic Beauty Cream, the By Terry and Tan Luxe ranges, or their legendary Discovery boxes, they curate absolute Tier 1 products. For our long-time listeners, the legacy code is still active. Use BIN25, BIN25 at checkout for 25% off your entire order. Head to beautyboat.com today, and thank you for supporting the brands that support this platform. G'day. This is Just Tack and Nathan Borg. Today we are looking at what happens when an entire industry tells you no and you just stubbornly refuse to listen. Nathan played Curtis Perkins on Neighbours, making history as the first actor with a cochlear implant in a recurring role on the show. But getting there was a bit wild. He literally had industry professionals and acting schools tell him his deafness meant he couldn't have a career. Spoiler alert, they were incredibly wrong. We get into the absolute chaos of stepping onto one of the fastest-paced TV sets in the world during peak COVID. Imagine relying heavily on lip reading to understand the world when every single person around you is wearing a mask. Nathan breaks down how industry legends like Jackie Woodburne and Annie Jones quietly had his back, and how he taught directors basic sign language just to keep the cameras rolling. We also get into the exhausting reality of being forced to be an advocate when you really just want to act, and the incredible new deaf-gay romance series he's currently developing with SBS. Speaking of teaching people signs, since Nathan had to teach the Neighbours directors basic sign language, I'm going to teach you a very basic universal sign right now. It is the physical motion of your finger hitting the subscribe, follow, or like button on whatever app you're looking at. It takes zero creative energy, but hitting that button is the single best way you can help this show build its community, so I can keep bringing you these deep, unfiltered conversations. I mean, come on, it's that easy. Just do it. Also, early in this chat, Nathan and I go off on a whole tangent about being tragic digital hoarders, spending stupid amounts of money on hard drives just to keep gigabytes of old self-tapes. Now, there is a very good chance Peeping Tom cuts that entire conversation from the final edit. And to be fair, the man is wonderfully ruthless with the edit. He routinely chops almost an hour out of most of these chats just to keep the pace sharp. If he axed our rant and you want to hear exactly what you missed, that is why you need to jump into our Patreon. Members can get access to the full uncut video versions where nothing is left on the cutting room floor, plus the power to submit your own questions for future guests. A quick heads up, before you do, skip the Patreon app on your iPhone. Apple imposes a 30% markup on all in-app purchases. It simply costs you more money out of the pocket to use the interface. Fire up Safari or Chrome or whatever browser, use the link in our show notes or description, and keep that extra cash in your wallet for the Just Tack merch drop coming soon. All right, let's get into the reality of the hustle. This is Just Takaya Honda, that's me, Nathan Borg. I'm trying to think of where I really want to start with this, because you've got so much to you, and you've been through so much to kind of get where you are that people may not understand, and they may not understand the difficulties you've had to face to even just getting to the point where you're on Neighbours. A lot of people, well, for anyone getting a job on Neighbours, there's a long road usually that leads there. Often it's difficult, and for someone with a disability, as you're profoundly deaf, correct? So you have a cochlear implant. Did you get the cochlear implant when you were about 3? Am I remembering that correctly?
Oh, almost. You almost got it right. But when I was 2.
2. So close. Yeah. So were you born profoundly deaf?
I was born hearing. And then when I was 3 months old, though, I got meningitis, and the injection to get rid of meningitis can give you a disability. And then when I was 6 months, so like 3 months later, my mum realised I wasn't reacting at all. And my mum actually told me this really interesting story was that the nurse came over and this is how they did hearing tests back then. She she put me on the floor on the tiles and she clapped and no reaction. And then she stomped her feet on the floor and my head moved straight away, feeling the vibration. And the nurse was just like, "Oh, he's deaf." And then my mum was like, "No, no, no. How can you get that from doing that?" And the nurse was like, "It's vibrations. Deaf people feel vibrations a lot." And they got the test, yeah, when I was 6 months, and yeah, they found out that I was fully deaf. And then when I was 2 years old, got the cochlear implant. But from that point, it doesn't mean that I was able to hear straight away. I had to learn up until probably really up to 10 years old, in that range, to learn how to hear and learn how to speak. So my sound access and speech access was very, very delayed of understanding English, really.
Your brain had then not had the neurons that were processing sound for a long time. And so from 10 till
Mhm,
2 till 10, your brain's having to restitch
mhm,
understanding what this input is, and try to figure out
mhm.
what's this stuff I'm now receiving, which I didn't have for 18 months or whatever.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, a lot of acting jobs as well, people don't, in productions and that, but I think it's just because it's a thing that people don't know about, but people don't realize when I say, like, I'm profoundly deaf, it means my ears are fully deaf, and how I hear is through the cochlear device, through the microphone, and it goes into the cochlea with sound, and then it goes into my ear shell to make sound, to process, to understand what that sound is. So people don't realize that I don't have any natural hearing at all.
A pro to that being that if you don't want to hear anything, you could just take it off, and you've got like a you could sleep in the middle of a highway as long as you had a an eye mask or something, and then the noise. So there is a pro there, which is not so bad really.
It's called like a deaf gain. It's a word that we have in community, a deaf gain, where it's like these little
Yep.
gains you have like a benefit. Like, I recently was in the UK for work, and when I was coming home, I literally slept like 6 to 8 hours because I didn't have my Cochlear on, and I could just sleep with no sound, and it was just like, it's just honestly the best experience.
And you now are fluent in Auslan too, and some Auslan
Mm.
speakers that I've spoken to, they're joking about how it's great, at parties or at concerts or whatever, because it's just across the room. They can have full blown conversations and be making fun
Oh,
of
yeah.
people or whatever too.
Oh,
It's like
yeah.
this.
All the time. Yeah.
They're like secret agents or whatever. It's really cool.
We always have, like, conversations at parties and that, and if there's someone, like, next to us who's, like, a stranger who's, like, maybe mocking us, or like we want to
Mm.
talk about them, we're like, signing, like secret agents, and they just have like no clue, like, at all. We've had situations like that all the time. Like, it's just hilarious.
Which really goes to show the power of having community as well. And as any kind of minority, the more isolated you are,
Mm,
and the
mhm,
less you have an opportunity to find, for in your case, these deaf gains, which
mhm,
are little superpowers in a way. Uh,
yeah.
that obviously these things are kind of nice to have, but also you've had to face really tough situations because you were brought up in a country town, essentially. Bacchus, is it Bacchus Marsh? Is that how you say it?
I left there 6 years ago. I just got out, get out.
Yeah, and so I imagine there wasn't a huge deaf or hard of hearing community there.
I think there's two deaf people and an Auslan interpreter who live in Bacchus now, I believe, which is really interesting. Early 2000, there was not, any of that. And but none of my family lives in Bacchus Marsh anymore. We all
Mm.
we all left. My mum actually has really old, she's laminated them all, but like newspapers of me when I was born, because at the time it was such a thing about, like, oh,
Mm.
there's a deaf kid in town. Like, this is something new, and like and I'm looking at the context of the words on the newspaper is really interesting. It's the words are actually quite intense. Like I'm like, obviously it's back then, and our terminology is different and stuff like that. But we got to acknowledge that, of course. But it's just reading it is, for me, it feels quite intense because I'm like, oh, this is how I was received, at that time.
What was that wording that stood out to you? Can you remember like an example of that?
It was interesting because like the title will be like, oh, he's deaf and now he's hearing, and like, and that was really interesting to read because medical system makes it like once you have a cochlear implant, you're now a hearing person. But when I take off the cochlear implant, when I lose the cochlear implant, or when the device like goes flat and stuff, I'm still a profound deaf person. I still can't access to sound. The sound device is just a tool for me to access to sound. It doesn't really change who I am deeply, really.
So till 10, you kind of were learning to hear. And how was
Hmm.
school then for you? It must have been a real challenge, especially
Yeah.
those early years in a place which I imagine was not set up at all for,
Yeah.
let alone someone who is profoundly deaf and learning to hear, but
Mm.
someone just hard of hearing as a minimum.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
what were the challenges that other people might have taken for granted for you growing up there?
Because we lived quite far out in the west. There was a deaf kindergarten in the east side, and my parents were like, this is too hard of traveling. My parents work, and my mum had to work out to get me like integration aid, so like support people at school to help me out and like help me break down English and like helped me to be in I guess, a mainstream school environment. That was just because back then there was not a lot of resources. There was no like really Facebook or social media for my mum to access to find other people. I was pulled out of class, I think twice a week to like work with it was like a support worker. They came from Ballarat to work out how your understanding of level was going with maths and English and cooking and all that kind of stuff. And that was a really interesting experience, I think.
So when did performance come into your life? Like, how did it manifest itself?
Like, to be honest, in high school, I was quite bullied a lot. Like, I had kids like take my cochlear implant, break it, because they knew that I couldn't hear. So, like,
And I'm sure it's extraordinarily expensive too.
yeah, 10,000.
Ugh.
um, yeah. And there was a lot of physical bullying at school, and I did hid it really well from my family because I just didn't want them to know. And the integration aide, Sam, she encouraged me. She was like, "Why don't you just try our school production and being drama, it's more people in there are more, different and they're more inclusive." And I was like, oh, okay. And I tried it out in high and I tried it and I really loved it. And I will never forget my first ever performance for the school production. I only had 2 lines, and every night I forgot the lines because I was so scared, so scared. I would just forget my lines, and the lead actor would be like, are you forgetting like your one line? Like, come on.
Did you improvise something? What did you do?
I just stood there. I was so terrified. I was like, I can't do this. I think it was an anxiety of like, obviously your nerves like performing in front of people. But I think it was also the struggle of like hearing others on stage was another layer as well. So it was just like an overwhelming experience. But then when I got to year 12, they started to ask really serious questions about like your career. And I was like, I want to work in the film and TV industry. I want to do acting. And obviously they were very like, look, like, I don't know about that. And it was interesting. The school had told me that they were going to shut down the drama subject
Oh, yeah.
because of funding. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I end up, which was crazy. My parents were so scared. I end up going to a full-time acting course for theatre in year 12 in South Yarra, and I would commute every day from Monday to Friday for school, year 12, to do performing arts.
Was that like an hour or more?
Yeah, it was about an hour and 20.
Oh,
Yeah, and my parents were freaking out all the time because they were just like, "You're going to a different world that we've never taken you to." And I, as an 18-year-old, I was like, I have to go and, see. And that was my first time experience ever meeting very different people and a different world of performance. And that's where that experience of discrimination became quite harsh in the performance world. And I think that was a really tricky situation because I did the year 12 and I completed that. And then they had a second year of like diploma. And it was an option and I really wanted to do it. I was like, I want to continue this. And they they said no because of my deafness. They said no because like they were like, it's not gonna work because the industry is like not welcoming for deaf people and stuff like that. And that was my first time ever experience of like, what's wrong with my deafness? Like that was really weird experience for me. And I kind of was really confused. Um, and then that just started to happen a lot in workshops, like a lot of workshops with mentors and professionals and, or like casting workshops. It started to become that reminder of like, it'll just be like, they will try to like soften, like just let me know, be like, oh, hey, like, the industry is going to be, not accepting of who you are. And I found that really, really difficult. Those comments actually really motivated me. I was like, really like firing myself. I was like, you know what, like, because a lot of the times they would say like, look, you work really hard, you're skilled, and like, you always make sure you do your job, but it's just the person who you are is not going to be accepted. And I think that does happen a lot with people with minority backgrounds anyway. In a different full-time course that I started, um, was that I met Jason Herbison in at the school, and like that was amazing.
Jason Herbison being the executive producer of Neighbours. Now, before we get there, though, firstly,
Yeah,
nothing happens without people like yourself who, when hearing people who are in positions of power and authorities
yeah,
in the industries that we're perhaps trying to get into, tell us that you won't be able to do this. It takes people like you who go,
mhm,
hang on, no, I'm going
mm,
to. I'm going to, at minimum,
mhm,
I'm going to try, because if you don't, then no one does. And I can't imagine how many people that conversation's been had from whatever minority it is, saying, look, you're great,
mm,
but you're not going to get paid for this. And that's not
mm,
your fault. It's just that's the way you were born, in whatever realm that may be. Rather than being
mm,
able to say, like, no, no, no. Well, look, it's going to be hard, but you're great. You're just going to, like, the motivator should be saying, the authority should be saying, this is going to be harder for you than other people, and I just want you to be aware of that. So that,
yeah,
yes, I'm acknowledging you. I'm acknowledging that you're great and you can do this, but I want you to know, so that you're going in this aware, so that you're not blindsided, and that's
mm,
the reality you have to face. But you've kind of had you've anyone on that minority's had to face that hardship already,
oh
whether
yeah,
they've been able to recognize it or not, that their life is slightly harder because of
oh
something
yeah,
that's probably out of their control. So
yes,
kudos to you. I think that in and of itself needs to be applauded. Even if you didn't go on to perform on Neighbours and all the other things that you've done,
mm,
that shows a part of who you are, which deserves applause, because that's not an easy thing to
thanks,
do. So
mm,
good for you, and I'm sure you've inspired so many people purely just by making that simple act. So there's no question in
mm,
that. That's just a statement. So well done. But I guess what I'm wondering is that you went and did drama and you liked, I guess, the concept of it. You did the play. You obviously
mm,
have being overwhelmed. There's anxiety, there's nerves, there's all of the psychological
mm,
factors that you're being bullied, and people are then you're putting yourself literally on a stage to be judged and either applauded or laughed at or
mm,
whatever. Um,
yeah.
what after that experience still made you feel like, no, I really like doing this. This is something I'm willing to endure the hardships of and place myself in these uncomfortable positions to continue doing.
I think I found, people who were like, similar to me in terms of like what they love about, filmmaking and stuff like that. And that's what I really loved about that aspect. But I think, a lot of my friends, still tell me to this day, even my family, that I'm very stubborn. Like I won't accept, I won't accept the no. Like I'm very stubborn in the way. They're like, no, like you're not saying no to me. Like we're doing that. And like what I mean is like stubborn in a good way in terms of like for a good reason. Like for a good reason. Like not stubborn in a way like being, a diva, but just stubborn in a way that
Well, everyone's
like
got a little diva in them.
a little deeper in them. Yeah, for sure.
So tell us about that meeting with Jason,
It was at a full-time studio and it was the same school that Zimmer um was at.
the lovely Zimmer Anderson.
Yeah, love her. And she just finished the course and I just started. And Jason had come to the school here and there to watch people to do their performances. And, our class had that opportunity to perform, to do their scenes in front of Jason. And anyway, that happened and nothing really happened after a year. And I actually reached out to Jason. I was like, "Hey, look, I don't think you'll remember me from the school, but I just want to reach out about Neighbours and just have a chat with you." And then yeah, Jason was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, from the school. Like, yeah, yeah. I remember. He's like, you're the guy with the Cochlear implant." I was like, "Yeah, yeah, that's me." And then we then just started chatting from that point.
And that's one of the great things about Jason and what he needs to be applauded for through his tenure as the executive producer of Neighbours was that
Mm,
uh, I imagine from that point, you had discussions about bringing on a character that
mm,
had a cochlear implant and building that story and
mm,
trying to bring it in a truthful way, etc. And that's
yeah,
one of the things that what I'm getting at with Jason is he genuinely made a push for diversity, but not for diversity's sake. But with someone like yourself, especially you coming to him not just
mm,
going, oh no, that's not for us. Oh no, our audience they won't know how to perceive you, blah, blah, blah. But rather
yeah,
going, well, tell me more about that. Can we work together to build an honest and true version of your experience, bring it to screen and have that representation,
mm,
and that representation be as true to life as we can make it. Obviously,
yeah,
it's Neighbours. There's big
yeah,
storylines. We've got to make them work,
yeah,
and that's
yeah, of
whether
course.
you've got you're part of a minority or not. You're having to make sacrifices to
Oh
get the
yeah,
stories to work. But
oh yeah, yeah,
that's just part of it. You don't let
yeah,
the truth get in the way of a good story.
yeah.
um,
Oh yeah. I'll be honest with you, like, I was a little bit scared. I did say something to Jason. I was a little bit scared because I wasn't sure if it was, like, too, blunt or anything, but I just wanted to get my point across. Um, I said, I was, you know, applauding him for, being really open to, and being, diversified, like, with the casting and just, like, with the stories. And I just mentioned, the huge thing about Neighbours is everyone's welcome on Ramsay Street. And I said, look, I think I would love to see more people with disability stories happening and characters in that, background to start happening, in your show, down the years that you work on. And Jason was like, you know what, you're actually right. Like, that's the truth. And like, I think that's something that we should look into. And I said, yeah, definitely. Like, I think that something's a huge missing point in Australia. I still had to audition for Neighbours, and that was a really fun experience with Thea McLeod. I did an audition with her, and that was a really fun experience. And I understood. I was like, yeah, that's such a normal process. I wasn't expecting just to give a role. Like, I'm happy to still audition. Like, that's just the norm of it. And I think it was an interesting experience because I started Neighbours during COVID,
Oh,
and
that's right.
yeah, and that was an interesting experience because, I knew a lot of acting friends who were like, "Oh, I can't do anything," and I felt, um I'm gonna get emotional. Anyway, I got the first big gig, and I think, all that hard work happened, and I think in COVID was like, I felt like, "Oh, wow," like I, realized all the hard work that I did. I finally got there. It was an interesting, first time on a professional set was interesting for me because we had a lot of masks, and I rely on lip reading a lot. And then that was my biggest barrier that I first time was like, oh, okay, this is my first time ever having to advocate. And I sat with Jason and I said, look, I can't lip read anyone. And he got clear mask for people who wanted to wear that. And that was a really nice experience and opportunity um, to have that option for people to wear the clear mask. I still remember it. This is a shout out to April. She got the clear mask and she got all the Barbie stickers and on her clear mask. And I just was like, this is amazing. Like, this would never happen if I didn't say anything. And, and I just seen her having all those stickers and that on her, being creative with her mask. And I thought that was really cool. And to able to lip read her as well. And I think that really stuck to me to see people, I guess, in the room to, I guess, adapt to.
Well, your needs, because it didn't cost us anything to do that. In fact, I think some of the girls preferred it because it didn't screw up their makeup or whatever. Yeah, but it wasn't. It was also more comfortable than the elastics and blah blah blah. But that's such a simple change, right? Can have such a drastic effect for you because you would have simply been in a world where everyone's wearing masks, where your ability to communicate is drastically impaired, let alone you've finally booked your first big gig and you're coming in during a time when no one's getting work and you put a lot of work into it, and then you get there and just your ability to understand anyone is super impaired. So it's crazy to think how much harder every stage then has been for you to get where you are, really.
I think Neighbours gave me a lot of experience to learn about being an actor, but also being an advocate. And I think there were two roles that I was trying to, to manage with the media stuff. It was what do we do? How you do this for the deaf and hard of hearing community? And I was freaking out because I was at that point in COVID, I wasn't really I wasn't really in the deaf community at all. And I was freaking out, oh, I don't know, I'm just, an actor, it's scary. I was like, oh, do I have to, represent?
And that's one of the difficult things of that when you are any kind of minority, that when you are put into a place where you gain a public profile, it is assumed that you are then a representative, an
Mm-hmm,
advocate, an
mm-hmm,
ambassador, and thus have all of the knowledge and solutions as to what problems to solve.
mm-hmm.
Like the mask thing, it takes you then going, this is a problem, and having to advocate for yourself that I need help here. Which,
Yes.
to be fair to anybody else, it takes someone like you coming on to highlight it for them to know, because when you're not part of that minority or have that disability, it can be very
Mm.
hard to see the issues that those people are facing in that realm. So it's not
Yeah.
like, anyone's doing the wrong thing. It's just they don't know what the right thing is. And
Yeah.
you don't either, because like you I'm sure you didn't really think about it until you got there. We're like, oh no,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
oh no, we're doing all our rehearsals and our read
Yes.
through with masks
Yes.
on because, of COVID protocols.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yes.
only
Yes.
actually seeing people speak when we're doing the take for the
Yeah.
first time.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
um,
yeah. And I think as well, a lot of people don't realize when I started at Neighbours at that point was my only job because of that experience, exposure about the deaf and Hoven community. And, I only knew just a tiny bit of Auslan at that point. People don't know about this is that I actually, when I was working at Neighbours, I actually then end up getting a job in a deaf company and I worked with a deaf group that were fully deaf, no like devices. They only signed, and I put myself in that position to learn more and do better for myself and, and to understand and to like learn and be better at my signing and like all that stuff. So I was like doing Neighbours and going back to this deaf job,
what was the actual job?
internal communications officer. So like I would support all their communications for the company, but also externally for the deaf community. And that was a really great experience, but I think it was a hard juggle because I went doing that and then I would go back to Neighbours, go do, my character and, what I would learn from the deaf company. There was little inputs that I learned that I could do better and like I'll give that feedback to Neighbours and then like really like I don't think I slept during Neighbours. Like I was working really hard to like make sure that I did the right thing. Yeah.
Was there, because you're then put on that platform all of a sudden, you're having to be a representative, and not only do people outside the community then expect that of you, but inside the community then they can be like, well, you're our representative now. You need to know all the answers. You need to say all the right things, do all the right things,
Yeah.
be the ultimate pillar. Did you feel that pressure from the community as well?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. I would say my biggest, I guess, learning experience was when I did the Auslan for the Neighbours theme song.
Oh, yes.
Um, yeah, that was received well, but it was also received not well because I didn't work with a deaf person at that point. I worked with a hearing person who knew Auslan, and the consultancy should have came from the deaf community, but I didn't know that was, I guess, a cultural rule. Let's just say I learned a massive valuable lesson from that on social media. So I think that's what made me motivated to do better and to learn better for myself. And it made me realize a lot that I didn't know a lot about myself, I guess. From that point, I really had to really sit down for a second and like think about what I'm doing can affect me and others. So that was a really big learning experience, and I'm actually really thankful for it, even though it was hard. But I'm thankful for it because what I do now is like I have all that knowledge and all that knowledge for myself and my own identity, but also knowledge what to do best for the media and protecting the culture as well. So I think, yeah, huge experience.
Has the role on Neighbours then, and the platform that it gave you, then opened you more up to being a part of the deaf and hard of hearing community that you were so isolated from growing up away from anyone else, right? So has that opened up like a doorway which has given you access to then find that community and be amongst it?
Really, Curtis Perkins as a character was someone was more like an oral deaf person. And um and in my personal life I could sign. And that was a really interesting experience because I would meet deaf people in person and they didn't realize that I was able to sign. And that was an interesting experience because they're like, oh, you can sign. I'm like, yeah, I can sign.
Were they bitching about you? And then you were like, I know what you're saying.
Yes. Hmm. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to move away from you being an advocate and representative of the deaf and hard of hearing community, because you are far more than that, and it is something that we, as those representatives of those communities, can be reduced to, especially in environments like this. But at the same time, I acknowledge that it's really important to get your story of that out there, because I think for those people who connect to it, it's super important to hear and see. So thank you for indulging me in that way. But no, so tell me about Curtis and your approach to him, and the role, and what it was like coming on to a set like Neighbours as your first big gig.
A lot of my first scenes, and to be honest, all the way through on Neighbours, was with Jackie Woodburne and Annie
That's a
Jones.
privilege.
It was a huge privilege, and I felt very, very lucky. And also with Sally Upton as well, who, ended up becoming my auntie on the show.
Also a massive privilege.
Yes, massive. What I think, when you're doing your first time professional gig, you kind of worry about, am I going to get judged? Am I going to, am I going to get like disliked because of, my deafness and all this stuff? But, the three ladies who really stood by my side, and, with Annie and Jackie and Sally, they were very like, I think mainly Annie, just because I had a lot of scenes with Annie, to be honest. And we, she always made sure that like I understood, you know, what the director said, or like what things were said, because, sometimes it's very fast paced. Things might accidentally be miscommunicated because they're from far, from
Yep.
set.
And that doesn't just happen with someone who might physically not be able to hear it, but even any actor coming onto this set, whether they're new or even experienced. There was multiple occasions where I would turn to them and say, after a director had given a note saying, do you know what they want from you? Because every director speaks a different language. And someone
Yeah.
go, yeah, yeah. And I'm like, so you know that they want this? And they're like, oh, yep. So it's like
Yeah.
and the generally the better actors that I find, I'm not giving myself medals or anything, but generally are the ones that are then willing to like help everyone around them, because the better everyone else around them understands what everyone's trying to achieve, then the better everyone is, kind of thing. And Annie, Jackie, and Sally are the best at it, to be fair, as well.
Jackie, Annie, and Sally would put little cues for me to know what to do if I couldn't hear, or like what my action was. And, those little things came a long way. And like a lot of people don't know about that, of how much of those little micro things that they did with me on set. The little lines, sometimes like we'll have like another character say some lines behind me, and
Mm.
I couldn't hear that. And like, Annie and Jackie and Sally would like tap me. You won't see on camera, but they'll tap me and I would know, like, okay, we're good to go. Or like, that's my action. 2 weeks before we were going on set, I would always meet up with the director and the director's assistant, and I would teach them basic signs of like action, start, finish, or from the top. And they would learn those signs, and then they would do it for me and I don't think anyone would have known, because they would sign it from a distance, and I would just see
That's
it from a
awesome.
distance. And I would see it from a distance and be like, oh, that's what we're doing. And that experience from that point really helped a lot better, because, there'll be times where Annie would be like, oh, we're doing this. And I think she's so used to ways to work with me. And I'm like, oh, yeah, no, we just signed it. So, like, that was kind of cool.
That's awesome. That's like, that makes me really happy to hear that that the directors and stuff were able to do that, and it's such a
Oh, yeah.
simple thing for them. Because I imagine those
Mhm.
signs aren't complicated for the few things that made it easier for you. Because you were supposed to only be, it was like 6 weeks or something, an initial kind of stint, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
2
I
weeks.
actually 2 weeks. I was only booked for
Oh,
2 weeks, and then I was really sad because I was like, I work so hard, and I'm like, 2 weeks, and then I, was like, at the same time, let's just, it's okay. And then like, and I kind of got excited because when I read my last script, I was like, oh, wait, I'm not exiting. I'm like, am I still around? And I was like, I don't know. And I was like, I won't say anything. I'll just wait. And then my agent called me at the time. They were like, oh, they want you to keep you on. Do you want to do that? And I was like, 100% yeah. Like, my character hasn't like fully developed. Like, I need to. And then, yeah, fight between 6 years was the recurring guest for that long. So, yeah.
which is huge,
Mm,
for anyone coming onto the set and any character to be able to stick around that long.
yeah.
That's commendable to you, because that I can imagine that first 2 weeks probably was a bit of a test just to see how you'd go, not
Mhm.
because of your hearing, but just in general that can happen.
Actually, do you know what's funny? Ramsay Street. I
Mm.
actually been on there for 5, 6 years. I never had a scene on Ramsay Street.
You never shot on Pinocchio?
No,
How is that? That's actually impressive.
I
I don't
know,
know many people who would have been on the show that long who never had a scene
I
on
know.
Ramsay
I,
Street.
I,
How? I like that blows my mind.
I know. In the finale scene, when everyone's doing the farewell in that
Mm.
street, yes, I was there. So, like, yeah, I was
You were
there. I
like in the
was,
background, but you didn't
yes,
yeah.
but I didn't have a proper scene or anything on the street. And I remember every year I was like, this is the year I'm going to be on Ramsay Street.
Because
But
Vera lived on the corner, like, and you were living
I
with
know.
Vera, weren't you? Yeah.
Well, you're going to laugh at this. So I thought, Sally and I thought we lived together, yeah? And I
Yeah.
was like, surely at one point I'm going to be on Ramsay Street. Anyway, I got this script scene with Annie and I'm reading it and I'm like, that's not correct. Like it was saying that like I'm going to go visit Vera at her house. And I was like, that's not correct. I'm going to like
I
just
lived there.
yeah. And I was like, and I went to the writer's room, had a chat with them and they were like, no, the line's correct. And I was like, no, why would I be visiting? I live there. And they were like, no, you don't. And I was like, what? And I called Sally and I was like, Sally, I don't live on the street. I don't know where the hell I am. But
Yeah.
they actually end up removing that line because of the confusion, I think. But anyway, that line got removed and I laughed because I was like, wow.
So what's it been like since Neighbours?
I'm doing 2 series at the moment, which is very exciting.
Developing them.
Developing them, yeah. That I wanted to get Grant to start a crime series that I kind of started already written from 2 years ago. The other one that I have is called Bump Into You, and that one is with SBS and Screen Australia at the moment, which is really cool. That's a death romance one. I'm very excited for that one because it's a deaf gay romance, and I'm excited for that.
Mm.
And I think it's not just focus on that; it's also got a lot of, I guess, a deaf family and hearing family experiences around those concepts. And I think in Australia's like point of view, because deaf culture and growing up in hearing families, deaf families is all quite different around the world. With SBS and Screenshare, it's through, I don't know if you know it, Digital Originals. It's a program,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it's a program where they do short storytelling. So it's 6 episodes, 10 minutes each, and they have a whole platform on SBS called Digital Originals, and their aim for that is to do storytelling that's is what you would say maybe out of the box.
I think that's such a strong idea, and if you guys were able to make it in the right way, I think that
Yeah,
it could really open people's eyes for one thing, but also be just something a really interesting piece of storytelling and visual
yeah,
storytelling as well, um,
yeah.
which excites me. That's really really cool. You've kind of already answered this, but we didn't actually mention that you were the first. Uh, were you the first character on Australian television with the Cochlear or just Neighbours?
just on Neighbours, a
On
deaf
Neighbours,
character
yeah.
with a cochlear implant on Neighbours, yeah, because is a deaf actor, Sophia Golan, who has a cochlear implant as well,
Oh,
and
yes, of
she,
course, who I've worked with on Play School.
yeah, yeah, so she was the first one in Australian TV and from Play School. So, well done to Play School for that. Yeah,
Yep, she's directed me in a couple episodes now, so it's
yeah,
great working
love.
with her.
Yeah,
Um,
amazing.
but Kayla was asking what it was like to be the first character in Neighbours with a Cochlear,
Yeah,
but you kind of already answered that. So maybe mix
yeah.
that with, she's also asking about your favourite memories of playing Curtis.
It wasn't just an acting gig. I think it was a big experience personally and professionally that I learned for the better. And I think that I'm honestly so grateful to do a character for that long. I think
Mm.
you know, is an honor in that way. Yeah.
What's your favourite TV show to rewatch?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, it's different to like your favourite show because the favourite show that I might
Yeah,
like to rewatch is really different, right?
I do. I will say it's not a show; it's a film. But
Mm.
Priscilla, I do love
Oh
Priscilla
wow,
and Tomorrow When the War Began film, the two
the film, yep.
Aussie films. I do love rewatching those, and I think what's funny is because I'm working in transport on film productions, American ones
Mhm.
in Melbourne, and a lot of conversations I've had with crew that I realise how much Australian films that I watch, like I watch it on repeat, whereas like most people will like watch American or like a British show or
Mhm.
whatever. I just they're the two films, Australian films that I love watching because I think they're both films that really took a step, I think, in the industry in a way, I think.
Yeah.
So, I really watching it. I could just watch it. Like if I had to watch it every Sunday, I would.
What's a thing or a couple of things that you wish people knew about the deaf and hard of hearing community, or things that people could do differently that are simple that would make a big difference to people in the community as well?
A lot of deaf arts people are always in a consult situation where I think it needs to shift to, putting the deaf person as a director or as a writer for that specific story than a hearing person because I think people should be reminded that deaf is a culture and there's a lot of layers in our community that we have that are really, beautiful. Like there's so many deaf editors, deaf directors, and, the list goes on that I know of that do deserve to be in those positions. So I hope to see more of that.
And look, you're one of the ones that are breaking down the barriers and the walls. Um, so kudos to you. I hope that you can recognize that within yourself. I definitely recognize, and I hope the audience can recognize uh, the difficulty of doing that and how inspiring you are by being willing to be that person, to take those steps, to go through those hardships, to lead the way and pave the path so others can follow you too. Um, so thank you so much for coming on Just Tack and sharing your story in that way.
No, thank you. It's been actually a dream. I remember when you started this podcast, I was like, oh, I really want to do this. And I was like, I'm not gonna I didn't want to contact you and be like this diva. I just was like, I'm just gonna let you reach out to me when the time is right. And you actually reached out honestly at the most perfect time. So I think, the universe, you know, made that happen. So like I really appreciate it. It's really nice to see you again and everything.
And that was the wonderful Nathan Borg. A huge thank you to Nathan for coming on and being so open about the realities of navigating this industry when the system simply isn't built for you. Make sure you keep an eye out for his upcoming series, whether it be on SBS or elsewhere, because if he tackles that even with half the stubbornness he tackled Ramsay Street, it is going to be something special. And if you made it to the end here and you were wondering where that whole tangent about digital hoarding went, congratulations. You've just experienced the ruthless editing of Peeping Tom. To get the full uncut video of this chat and hear everything he left on the cutting room floor, head over to our Patreon. As I said at the top, do not use the Patreon app on your iPhone. Use Safari or Chrome to sign up so you aren't paying Apple's 30% markup. Keep that extra cash in your pocket, especially because we have that exclusive Just Tech merch dropping very soon. If you haven't already, do the universal sign and hit the subscribe or follow button on whatever app you are listening or watching on right now. All right, that is it for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm just Takaya Honda, and that was Nathan Borg.